Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. Today we're test driving the all-new 2021 Ford Bronco Sport, the baby Bronco of the new Bronco family. Yeah, now they tell me the Bronco's born wild. So after I show it to you inside and out, we're going to take it for a drive out here in the desert and see how wild it really is. What we have here is the Ford Bronco Sport in the Big Bend trim grade. Now, Big Bend is just one level up from base. Now, I love it when they give me a vehicle that's not a fully loaded car. I get to see what people normally buy. This is the mid-grade. This has got the base engine. This has got mid-grade trim inside. As tested, we're at $32,000 and some change, and that's about average out there in Ford Bronco Sportland, and you get up to about 34. That's sort of the range where most of these fall. If you get up to a Badlands, you're going to spend quite a bit more, but you do have a larger motor and a little bit more robust chassis and suspension in the way of componentry. But what this is a Ford Escape that is slightly shorter as far as the chassis and architecture is concerned. You've got 1 inch less of wheelbase, 6 inches less of overall length, and that really shows up in the shorter overhangs, which for off-roading and being out in the wild is a good thing. When it comes to styling, they have pulled a lot of retro touches in from the old Bronco, especially when we look at this hood. This has a wrap over clamshell hood design, so it wraps over, and what that gives you here is a nice little kick up on the edge of the hood, the leading edge. If you look at that from behind the wheel, that gives you a nice 1960s-like retro look. And that hood sticks straight out from you too. It's a very boxy, tall, sort of fist in the wind front end. Looking at the front, magnetic grille on this, which is the color they call this. LED headlights, LED daytime running lights. Those things light up pretty bright during the daytime. And the lower fascia, pretty plain wrapper, I'd say. Black plastic. Not a lot of extra trim and fake anything really. It's just black plastic. Also in that front fascia, you will see LED fog lights. And the wheels on this one are actually pretty handsome for mid-grade. Sometimes they don't give you the best wheels. I think these are some of the better looking wheels on the Bronco Sport. 17-inch in the magnetic color. I like the design. And tires on this one, definitely street tires, not really off-road tires. One thing they've done on all of the Bronco Sports is the trim grade logo on the door is a nice graphic. I think it looks cool, gives it sort of a sporting goods feel, sort of a backpack kind of thing going on. But being where we are in the trim grade lineup, this has a lot of black plastic on it, the mirror caps, the lower rockers. Gloss black plastic here sort of gives you a wraparound look with the windshield, and that's really more evident on other colors that are lighter. The color on this one is the Alto Blue. I think it's pretty handsome looking. And coming down this way, other black trims are the gloss plastic, and this one does have the Ford punch the code and open the door thing that lights up from behind. Kind of a retro touch there. That's been around since the 70s. From this angle, I think you can see a lot of different styling elements going on that, to me at least, bring in a lot of different things. I'm seeing a little bit of the previous generation Escapes here, like from around 2008, 2009, in its overall shape and profile. But if you look at the hip line there at the back, there's also just a little bit of Range Rover. Here at the roof line, you see a little bit of an angle that I think sort of harkens back to the 1970s, 1980s Broncos just a little bit. And this also, in that roof line at the top, you see what they're calling a safari roof, which sort of a pop-up there at the top. Again, sort of pulling from some of the vehicles we've seen from Land Rover and so forth. At the rear, Bronco Sport big lettering with LED taillights at each end, and a nice plain wrapper lower fascia. Not a lot of dress up, not a lot of stuff down there that you're going to have to worry about getting dirty or scraped up. Not a power hatch on this model. This does open in two different ways though. This does open up in the standard way, but this also has a separate openable glass, which can be convenient for some of your smaller things. I do find that, however, with this big unit here that's there with the motor for your rear wiper, it does get in the way if you have anything bigger than a small grocery bag. So it's a nice touch, maybe a retro touch, but if they were really going to do this seriously, maybe could have designed that a little more practically. As I said when I was showing you the outside of the vehicle, I love it when they give me a mid-grade or a base grade vehicle that really represents what most people are actually going to buy. So often they give me fully loaded cars with leather and everything like that, and it really sort of masks some of the basic design elements that a lot of cars have. And so here we are in the Bronco Sport, which, as I said, is based on the Ford Escape. And so what that means is there are a lot of parts and pieces of this interior that are identical to the Ford Escape, and on the upper half they've actually made this very different because it is the Ford Bronco and supposedly an upgrade. As I look at the dash, the entire upper half of the dash is an all-new design that actually has some pretty good materials. There's a nice soft touch sort of fabric looking material that's also on the door panels. And so it's clear they've tried to elevate the game a little bit, but some of the other parts in here that are from the Ford Escape, like the lower half of this dash and the center console, do have that same cheapness that we talked about when I reviewed that vehicle last year. To a practical matter, we've got a number of good features in here. I love these cloth seats in terms of how they look. This material is a nice tweed that they call Easy Wash, and it comes in two different shades, either this gray or a dark black. The problem with these seats is that they are the most uncomfortable seats I have ever sat in since I've been doing this. They are the exact same seats that were in the Ford Escape I tested last year, and also the exact same seats that were in the Ford Mustang Mach-E. They look like they should be comfortable, but they're not. There's no support. They're very high in the center, and they're sort of spongy, and so they don't have any support when you're going back and forth and around corners and things like that. You don't sit in them, you sit on them. And the worst part about it is when it comes to the adjustment range. The front of the seats does not adjust for height. There is a height adjustment, but it hinges off the front. And so for me, the front of these seats is too high, and so it makes a very uncomfortable driving position no matter how I adjust these, because I can't lower this seat to where I can get a good relationship with the pedals. They've just set these seats too high, and there's no way to fix that. And the other thing that's going on here is the steering wheel angle. Because of the way they've adjusted the driving position here, the steering wheel angle comes up, it's almost like a bus. And I hate to complain about stuff like this, but this is what you need to know if you're out there looking for vehicles. I will say that the outward visibility is good. As I said, from the outside, you can see over this hood. There's a lot of it to look at, but it doesn't block your vision. It's a nice view from in here, very retro. As I sit here and look forward, a nice steering wheel that's leather covered, although I will say Ford's leather always looks and feels like plastic, and in fact I thought this was plastic vinyl until I read that it was actually leather. A nice logo in the center, the Bronco logo, a nice touch. They tried to make it special. The instrument cluster, however, tells me that it's just another parts bin piece. It has a very small digital screen in the center, and it's a pretty basic instrument cluster. I would have thought with the Bronco they would have maybe elevated that a little bit, given us something with some visual interest that was special. Looking at the center stack, it's pretty simply laid out. The top half is all new with the Bronco, infotainment screen at the top, hard controls below, and just below that a nice cubby to lay things that you might have along on a road trip. And down below is another cubby for your phone, and there's actually a wireless charger on this one, USB ports as well as a 12-volt power port. Here, another thing that I really don't like that Ford just loves to do, and that is the rotary gear selector right out of the Ford Escape. I don't think it has any place here in this vehicle at all, because this is really sort of a performance adventure vehicle. It should have a lever, something that's more intuitive, especially if you're out in the wild trying to back up and maneuver. This dial just really sucks. Also down below is the GOAT modes, kind of a cute little extra they've done. This is the drive modes. They call it GOAT modes, go anywhere terrain. This does not have the full suite of GOAT modes that you might find up in the Badlands model, which actually has more four-wheel drive hardware under it, but it does have quite a few, and those light up on the screen when you go to use that. The center console does actually have some pretty good space in it. There's room for, I would say, 2 Kleenex boxes in there. And down on the side of the console, there's also a map pocket, in addition to pretty sizable map pockets on the doors. The rear passenger compartment of the Bronco Sport isn't a place that you're going to mistake for a full-size SUV. We're definitely in the compact class here. These seats are set for my height, about 5'8", 5'9", with my boots on, and while I still do have reasonably good leg room, if I had a 6-footer here, my knees would be up against these seats. The good thing is I have a nice high seating position, not something you find in this class all the time, which means that in spite of the fact that these seats are flat, they are hard, I don't feel like I'm in an unnatural seating position. And the other nice thing about this rear compartment is there are plenty of amenities. There are AC vents, charging ports down at the bottom, and there are some nice storage compartments here on these seats. Nice zippered pouches on the back of each one of these seats, and it's just nicely done. That's one of the areas that they've shown a little bit of sparkle when it comes to upgrading this interior for the Bronco theme. This seat, as you'd expect, it does fold down in a 60-40 split. Look at that cargo area back there. It has a nice rubberized liner, very rugged. I like that, and that's not extra. That comes with this particular vehicle. Under that, a spare tire. Very important in this class. It's going to get you out of the rough if you get stuck there and cut a tire open. Stepping back and really having a big picture look at this interior, I think the big takeaways are the fact that Ford still has a problem with material quality. As I look around here, there are so many different finishes and different hues of the same color that it looks like they've got 20 different suppliers, each making their own part, and none of it really matches up. There are some good new stuff that they've done to make this the Bronco aside of the escape pieces, but it still feels bargain basement and not at all up to the competition in this price range. Switchgear is okay, but the real big disappointment here is these seats. These seats are, as I said, the most uncomfortable seats I've ever tested in any car, and Ford really needs to figure that out because almost every other manufacturer out there knows how to make chairs, and they make really good ones. And why Ford suddenly started making bad ones, I don't know. I don't get it. Nonetheless, this interior gets 3 out of 5 stars. This infotainment system is Ford's Sync 4. Now, this is the same exact system that I tested recently also in the Ford Escape, and I didn't rate it so well, and I have to do the same here. It's got a nice big screen. It's right where you can see it. It's easy to touch. It's easy to maneuver around here, but the problem is, my biggest complaint about it is the fact that it's slow. It doesn't respond very quickly to your touch. It's like a slow computer that doesn't quite follow up as fast as it should, especially when you're driving. The audio quality is okay. The feature content is okay. It does have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Those are the expecteds here. Sirius XM, as well as all manner of Bluetooth capability. But in this price range, in the low to mid 30s, a lot of vehicles out there do have a surround view camera. This does not, just a straight backup camera. And really, the biggest complaint is the fact that it just doesn't work that well. The menus aren't that responsive to your touch. So this infotainment system gets 3.5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, let's take a drive. And today we're actually going to start out here on the trail right where I was standing when we started the video. And this is just a nice place to sort of see how this vehicle really works in the wild. This is a place you might go out exploring. It might be a place you're taking your equipment out to go for a ride. Maybe you're hauling some ATVs. Maybe you just like to go out and spelunk around a little bit. And so a trail like this is a nice way to see how this vehicle can actually work in this environment. And so with 8.7 inches of ground clearance, this is a vehicle that can be taken out in the wild without really questioning too much, because that's about the same ground clearance that the majority of off-road SUVs out there on the market offer up. The suspension already feels to me that it's pretty much tuned for street driving, and that makes sense because 99% of the drivers are going to spend 99% of the time driving this around town on the highway. This is a vehicle that's probably actually not going to get driven out here too often, so the suspension tuning tends to be a little stiffer and a little bit less forgiving for some of these moguls and things like this. And because this thing is small, this offers a great deal of maneuverability, even more so than most Jeep Wranglers and things like that are going to offer up. Switching venues to the Desert Washboard Road, this is actually a place that I think tests this vehicle a lot more than a little bit of a trail off in the wilderness, because this has this rhythmic surface washboard that can make even the best vehicles out there feel like a giant POS. This tests how well the body structure is put together. It tests how well the suspension's tuned. It tests how well everything works together to keep this a nice, quiet, comfortable environment. And so what I'm finding out so far is that I'm getting a lot of rattling from the interior bits and pieces. You can probably hear that. That's the door panel. but I can hear rattles and squeaks coming from all over in here, and a little bit of shuddering and a lot of vibration coming through the chassis. And that's because we are in a crossover, not a body-on-frame SUV that's built for off-roading. This is not the best suspension, the best chassis hardware available on the Bronco Sport. This is the base model in terms of chassis hardware, which means basically we're driving a Ford Focus with a lift kit. That's just how it is. So Washboard Road, not the most impressive vehicle I've driven out here. On the pavement, which is where most people are actually going to be driving and enjoying their Bronco Sport, this is a vehicle that drives pretty much like any other Ford car or crossover. It's got a medium to firm suspension, and the actual responses that you get from turn-in, not too bad. It's got good tires on it. There is a little bit of wind noise at speed, I found, because of its shape, but when it comes to the ride and driving experience in the city, it's generally what you'd expect. One area where it does disappoint, not unlike the off-road driving we just did, is things like speed humps and speed bumps, potholes. The suspension tends to crash over those things because the bushings on this really aren't set for a lot of isolation, which typically that's what you want with an off-road vehicle, something that you're going to take out in the wild. So chassis overall gets 3.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so now that we've got past all of the fun stuff, we need to talk about what's under the hood. I saved the best for last, because what's under the hood of this thing is rather interesting, I must say. 1.5 liter EcoBoost engine, turbocharged engine is what's standard here. 181 horsepower. Sounds pretty typical of Ford. They love their EcoBoost engines. But what makes this one different is it's a 3-cylinder. Yeah, 3-cylinder engine, 1.5 liter, 3-cylinder. And it's all about saving fuel. We've got an 8-speed automatic transmission. All-wheel drive is standard here, but to save fuel, this engine has a lot of things going on. It's got both port and direct fuel injection. It's got cylinder deactivation. It can run on 2 of those 3 cylinders when you don't need all the power. So it can cut off one of the cylinders and run like that. And it has auto start-stop. So you come to a stop at a stop sign, off goes the engine. Starts back up when you let off the throttle. So I guess the real big question here that I always ask is, how does it go? And 60. So this accelerates actually pretty good, about 7.5 to 7.7 seconds, so say the other media outlets who've actually measured it. And that feels about right. Even though this is a tiny little engine with 3 cylinders, it actually has pretty decent power. But that is where the enjoyment of this powertrain sort of comes to a screeching halt. And it halts a lot because it's got an auto start-stop system, which I absolutely hate. And because this is a tiny little 3-cylinder engine, it shudders to a stop and it shudders to a start. And 3-cylinder engines have a strange sound. It's hard to describe, but it's different. It's different. And in stop-and-go driving around town, especially in town on the pavement, this 8-speed automatic transmission I have also found to be very jerky, very jinky. It grabs, it pulls, and there's this very on-off switch kind of effect to when you let on and off the gas when you're driving around town. It's not the smoothest transmission in the world. It's tuned for saving gas. It's got every single tool that there is to make an engine fuel efficient thrown at it. So what is this rated at? It's rated at 25 mpg city, 30 highway, and 26 combined. Really? That's it? That's it? That's all I get for all of that stuff that I have to put up with? And the thing is, in my week with it, I only actually saw 23 mpg. That doesn't seem like very much for having to put up with this rough, unrefined, shuddering, stopping and going, jerky driving experience all day. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And I hate to sound like I'm bitching, but this is what Ford's given me, right? This is the base engine. Now granted, you can get a bigger, more powerful engine that's a 4-cylinder in this in the higher trim grades, but Almost all other trim grades except that top trim grade come with this. And the thing is with all of the effort and all of the might they put into making this engine fuel efficient, I have to look at things like the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder Toyota RAV4. That is an engine that has more power. It's just an everyday 4-cylinder, nothing special about it at all. It powers a comparably sized SUV, if not maybe a little bit larger. That gets 27 city, 34 highway, and 30 mpg combined. And that's just a regular non-turbo 4-cylinder everyday motor that gets much better fuel economy and in a bigger, heavier vehicle. So that just goes to show you that maybe this isn't the best approach, especially for something big and heavy like this, because this little engine really has to work. And that's the rub, for me at least. So this powertrain, not very impressed. I hate to say it, I really do. 2 out of 5 stars. Okay, my friends, now that we've talked about everything else, let's talk about value and our final score. Now, I have to be honest with you, I am not nearly as impressed with this vehicle as I hope to be. This is a Bronco, right? This has got the iconic Bronco name and the pony on it. It's a lot like a Mustang. You have visions, you have expectations, you have, visions of fairy tales in your head, right? Well, this is no fairy tale, I hate to say it. After all the other things we talked about, and now I look at, at $32,000 is tested, how this stacks up against everything else you can spend that same money on in this class. You've got the Jeep Renegade, a little bit smaller. You've got the Jeep Cherokee, a little bit bigger, but they both offer the same flavor of vehicle, and in my opinion, they offer a lot more capability, performance, efficiency, comfort, versatility, handling, enjoyment, all of the stuff we've already talked about. They offer more, in my opinion, than this does for the money. So I look at that price, I look at competitiveness. Even Toyota, Nissan, Subaru, a lot of these other brands offer vehicles that just, I hate to say it, man, this thing's kind of at the lower end of that scale, in my opinion. So I rate value here at 3.5 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 3.5 stars for the review. There you go. Now, if you like the video you just saw, click right there, or better yet, subscribe to my YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.